Hello and welcome to the Wood End Barn podcast. My guest today is Iain Halket of the Folding Theatre Puppet Company. Now Iain, you're bringing a performance of the Snow Queen to Wood End Barn on Monday the 4th of April. And this is a story which I love, by the way, and I wish more people knew about it. It's a story which appeals to children and adults, isn't it?
Yes it is, yes. Very much an appealing fairy tale. It's basically an adventure story. Concerns a little girl called Gerda who goes on a search for her lost playmate. I think that's an enduring theme in a great many cultures, the sort of transition from childhood to maturity through an adventure.
And this is interesting because, I mean, the female essentially is the hero, isn't it?
Yes, it's one of these funny stories. I've worked on a production previously at Norwich Puppet Theatre many years ago, and it was one of the funny things, there was only one female performer in the entire cast, the rest were males. And the entire story is basically made up of female characters. There's only 3 or 4 males in them, and they're kind of subsidiary characters. So it's very much a girl story, a woman's story.
Is this a modern story about girl power? You know, the Spice Girls, I'll tell you what I want, what I really, really want.
Well, no, I don't think it sort of relates to that sort of slightly aggressive aspect of female culture, I suppose. It's much more about endurance, I think, which is very much a feminine quality.
Yeah.
Being able to endure under hardship. And Gerda has to learn a great deal as she travels, I suppose, in her journey to grow up.
And do you think that young people actually pick up on these themes, or do they see it as just a fascinating fairy tale? Well,
it'd be nice to think that, subconsciously we all pick up on these things. That's the reason fairy tales are enduring stories, because they teach us something about the world, and I think there's still a lot of lessons within the Snow Queen that are relevant to modern life, so hopefully children will unconsciously latch onto those ideas and remember them.
So what kind of puppetry is it? Is it traditional with strings and things, or is it sort of hand glove puppets and things?
Yes, it's traditional, mainly glove puppets. There's one main rod puppet and there's a couple of small stick puppets, and I think 5 of the female characters are actually played by me with various hats on, because there are a lot of characters in the show, so rather than just have an awful lot of puppets that appear briefly, I kind of play a lot of the older female characters myself.
Yes, and puppetry, does that enable you to tell... It's a daft question. I mean, I think I know what you're going to say, but I'll ask it anyway. Does using puppetry and that kind of theatre enable you to tell these kinds of fantasy stories more easily?
Yes, I suppose it does, in many ways, because you can allow your imagination to essentially run riot when you're creating the characters, both physically and in a performance sense. And that allows you to be a bit more adventurous with how they look and how they behave. Mm-hmm. But it basically just teaches you to be a storyteller.
All right, of course. That's what it's all about, isn't it?
Yes.
So in that case, what does puppetry offer you? Is it you personally, and in terms of your career and the things that you enjoy, what does it offer you over live theatre, say?
Well, I trained as a set and costume designer originally, so I bring those skills to puppetry. Most puppeteers have to be very multi-skilled because, before you can produce a puppet show, you basically have to design and build your cast. So most puppeteers tend to be makers as well as performers, and be much more hands-on with an actual performance. So we'll be dealing with, half a dozen characters, plus the set, plus the sound and lighting as well at the same time. So it can be a very sort of fulfilling job, whereas if I'd remained just in mainstream theatre, I probably would have spent most of my time drawing designs and pictures and not actually doing much else.
Yeah. Well, look, Iain Halket bringing Hans Christian Andersen's Snow Queen to Wood End Barn on Monday the 4th of April. That's at 2 p.m. Thanks very much for joining me, but it's just the last word is that it's a show for parents as well as children and for adults, really, who like a good story.
Yes, it's very definitely a family show, and parents will get something out of it as well as children.
Great stuff. Iain, thank you very much for joining me.
You're very welcome. Thank you.